Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm your host today, Val Pettigras, and with me, representing the 5th Assembly District, which includes Suffolk County, is Assemblyman Graf. So good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And this is kind of a historical moment, if you will, because we may actually have a budget that's early. Not even on time, but an early budget. But I don't know if that's good news or not. You tell me.
Well, we have the beginning of an early budget. I still don't have the numbers. I'm still waiting for it to come in, and hopefully today I'm going to get a better picture of what's going on. A couple things are still troubling me. Number one, mandate relief. We heard a lot about it. It's not forthcoming in this budget. What mandate relief is, so that the viewers know, is when the government tells another form of government, be it the county, the town, the school district, a fire district, that they have to do something in order to comply with the law, but they don't give any funding to go with it. A great example of this is the fire department are told now, there was a fire in New York City, and in New York City what happened, there were a couple firemen that died because they were on the roof and they wound up jumping off. So they put in legislation to say that all fire departments had to have these bailout ropes. Well, it's costing the local fire districts around $80,000 for the training and the ropes. And what's really bad, so now they have to pay this out. It comes out of their budget. But what's really incredible is because of what happened in New York City, the local fire departments have to pay this, yet New York City was exempted from this law. So
that doesn't even make any sense.
Welcome to Albany. You know. So there are all kinds of things. If you look at the school districts right now, they're forced, the way our laws are written, they're forced to go out and buy calculators. And the calculators are $160. However, they can buy the same exact calculators in Staples for like $60. So we're forcing them to pay, not we, I just got here, but they're forcing them to pay $100 extra that we're just wasting a taxpayer's money.
In other words, the system is forcing them, the
Right.
system that's always been in place. And you list some great examples, and one on a statewide level would be that of Medicaid. The state dictates what the counties what services they'll provide, and not every county really requires the same services. They don't even get to pick and choose what they're going to offer. The state just says, you're going to offer this, and a lot of times that's why property taxes go up.
Right. What I have been arguing all the time is I'll go into committee meetings and I'll look at the legislation that's coming out, and I will talk to the person putting the legislation in, and I'll say, who's paying for this? How much is this going to cost? And it drives me nuts because the answer is the same all the time. That's to be determined. Well, you wouldn't sign a mortgage agreement, right?
And I believe that we've talked about that
Right.
before. That's crazy thinking, and yet that's been going on here for decades.
Right. So, I mean, this budget, I'm looking at, I'm waiting for the numbers to come. And one of the things we have to look at is my schools in my district were hit disproportionately. And the teachers union has been coming in. But, you know, one of the things you have to understand, we're spending more money in New York State than we're taking in. I don't know what other legislators are doing, but what I'm trying to do is to get the schools to look for outside funding sources. And what I mean by that is there are grants available. So I've been talking to the schools. I'm going to try to help them or show them where they can get other money to offset the cuts that they're getting from the state. They're not getting this money anymore. And everybody realizes that. But I'm also looking at legislation. And the legislation that I'm looking at, getting back to making them spend money, one piece of legislation, it's based on common sense, is if a government entity, and that would be a school, that would be a fire district, that would be a county, that would be a town, that would be a village, if they bid something out, and after they get the lowest bid, they check with the state contract price for that service or commodity, and then they find that they can buy it cheaper on the outside, 10% cheaper on the outside, then they can buy it on the outside. Why are we making them spend more money, waste more money than we need to? So that's one piece of legislation that I'm looking at. The other one is the schools came to me, and everybody's talking about you're going to lose these younger teachers. And another piece of legislation that I have out there to help the schools save some money is the teachers when they retire. It's 25 years. There was a bill last year that said they could retire after they have 25 years of service, but they have to be 55 years old. So what I did is I put in legislation where if you have 25 years of service, we'll waive the age requirement for 1 year, and it won't have a detrimental impact on their pension. So that will give a certain amount of teachers, or a number of teachers, an opportunity to retire now. Then and they're the higher paid teachers, where we can keep some of the younger teachers that aren't making the same salary. So that's another incentive program that I'm trying to do. The other one is years ago, and going back to grants, years ago the state had a program. All it was a website. It was called RAIN. And what that did is it listed every single grant that was out there, whether it was a federal grant, a state grant, or a private grant. And it would break it up into categories. So what I actually did is I put in legislation to reinstate that website. It's not enough. You can't just say, okay, you're doing a lot less. You're going to have to do a lot more with a lot less. You have to give them avenues where they're able to do that. So that's some of the pieces of legislation that I'm looking at. I'm trying to work hard with the different government entities that are out there in order so that they can find other sources of revenue, because the state's broke. Nobody denies that. We're spending $5 billion. We're taking in $2 billion. The numbers don't add up. So it's not good enough to say to them, well, I'm sorry, but you're not getting it. You have to work with your school districts. You have to work with your fire districts. You have to work with your towns, because they're strangling the people, the taxpayer here. And people are moving out in droves, and we can't afford that anymore.
And we talked about that issue the last time that we got together, the fact that people are leaving because they can't afford to live here based on a number of issues, property taxes being one of them, and school taxes, and the fact that if it moves or you know, if it's there, you're going to tax it.
Well, we talked about the baby tax
Right.
last time, the cancer tax last time. We talked about the sick tax that they're trying to impose. These are all problems that I see in the budget that I have to address.
And speaking of addressing, just recently the Assembly passed its version of the budget. Let's listen to what Assemblyman Al Graf had to say regarding that.
People are moving out of this state because they can no longer afford to live here. Many of the senior citizens that I talked to, who said they were born and raised in my area on Long Island, now tell me they cannot afford to live here on a fixed pension. They've been screaming out for mandate relief. None is coming. Furthermore, children are moving out in the droves. As I talked to a school district, I had 50 kids in a classroom. I asked them, by a show of hands, how many of you believe that you can go to school, come back here, find a job, raise a family? Not one hand went up. And what they said was that it was the taxes that are going to force them off the island. We can no longer sustain this anymore. We need to fundamentally change how we do business in the state of New York. It just occurs to me as I sit there in committee meetings, and I keep hearing over and over again as we pass more and more legislation, I keep asking the same question. How much is this going to cost? I keep getting the same response. This is to be determined. You wouldn't sign a mortgage if you didn't know the price. Business as usual keeps going on, and this is a reflection of this, as business as usual. The people have spoken clearly this November. They want things to change. It hasn't. So for that reason, I will be voting in the negative. Thank you.
And of course, that was the Assembly's version of the budget. And the good news is that the Assembly, Senate, and the governor's budget all have to add up, all I's dotted the same, all commas in the same place, and if not, then the legislation doesn't pass. You didn't like the Assembly's version.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to like this version. There may be parts of the budget that I'm going to vote against because I just don't think they went far enough. They didn't go far enough. The state had an opportunity this time to make fundamental positive changes. And basically, I think they kicked the can down the road again. There were certain things they could have done. They didn't do it. Let's get back to the teachers for a second. The reason that I'm so focused on trying to work with the schools is you have to understand, if they lay off all these teachers, that's going to affect my local economy too. Right? If these teachers are out of work, it's going to affect the little small businesses in my area. It's going to affect the housing market. So I'm doing everything I can to help the school find alternative funding sources, right, to make sure that these teachers can somehow keep their jobs. Plus, we don't want to lose these young teachers, all right? They've been, I mean, education evolves. I have a degree in education. And what happens is curriculum in college brings new techniques, right? We have new technologies that these teachers, the younger teachers, that's going to grow the educational system in our school districts. And it's going to give our kids a more rounded, you know, education as they move through high school. So it's important to try to keep these younger teachers, and you want the older experienced teachers too.
Well, as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is what a great idea to have a mix of that, because you need that experience from older teachers or veteran teachers, more seasoned teachers. But you also need new blood in any organization, whether it's a volunteer organization, whether you're talking about the police force or teachers. You need that mix because everybody brings different ideas to the table.
Right. Well, you need the experience, but you also need the new technologies where I look at my kids where they use technology today. They're far beyond me with technology.
Oh, so is mine.
Yeah, I'm lucky I can text, and my kids had to teach me how to text. But look, it's important. I can't just wash my hands and say, sorry, we have no money. I'm doing everything in my power to try to work with the schools, to put in legislation that's based on common sense, to enable these school districts to be able to survive these cuts, but not diminish the kids' education. I mean, art's important, music's important. My daughter's an art major, okay? So I don't want to lose that for our school districts. So I'm trying to do everything in my power or use all of my experiences to help the schools navigate this wave that they find themselves on.
And it sounds to me as though you're solution-oriented, not problem-oriented. You had mentioned, it's one thing to say to people, look, I'm sorry, we don't have the money. But you're actually creating ways for, especially teachers, to find different avenues.
Right, and I'm pretty happy because the school board in Sayville, they've come into my office. Let me tell you, I've seen more teachers in the last month than I did through my grade school years from kindergarten to high school. But they're listening, and they're actually moving forward, looking to get other sources of revenue. So I feel good about that, and I'm going to keep pushing and helping them as much as I can.
And I hope that you can update us on that very soon, as well as the final completion of the budget. Right now, we're out of time, but we do have time to let you out there know how to reach your representative. Please contact Assemblyman Al Graf at 859 Montauk Highway, Suite 1, Bayport, 11705, or give him a call at 631-589-8685. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
We hope you join us for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.